Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing and inviting one of our witnesses, especially Chairman Jay Julius of the Lummi Nation. I appreciate him traveling all the way from the Northwest. Chairman Julius is a lifelong fisherman and knows firsthand how fish farms can impact wild salmon stocks and our fishing rights. Fish farm failures, mismanagement, and poor oversight have adversely impacted our fisheries, our coastal communities, and our ecosystem. Chairman Julius and everyone in Washington state knows about the high-quality, sustainable seafood that can come from our state's shellfish farms, but I also appreciate the fact that the chairman is looking at beyond shellfish and trying to look at the promise that this might bring. But we also have to look at the potential for tremendous peril when it comes to finfish agriculture. We must proceed with caution and get this right. 2 years ago in my state, a net pen failed and broke apart, sending around 300,000 non-native farmed Atlantic salmon into Puget Sound. This salmon spill threatened tribes, our fisheries, and our ecosystem. The spill of non-native fish into the Salish Sea exposed our native fisheries to disease and habitat competition. People from all over the world traveled to the Pacific Northwest to have our salmon. The fish farm failure compromised that economic livelihood of many people. And yet there was no plan in place for how to respond to the spill. Recognizing that their sacred and protected resources were at risk, the Lummi Nation and their tribal partners sprang into action to catch the escaped fish. Our Washington state legislature responded to the crisis by phasing out farming of non-native finfish agriculture in our waters and imposed fines on the Cook Aquaculture for its negligence. Washington's spill wasn't the first incident, and it certainly won't be the last. Just 2 months ago, the same company had yet another salmon spill on the Atlantic coast and Canadian waters near the United States. And even though this spill happened across the maritime border in Canada, we all know that fish move. These farmed salmon swam down the coast, and so we've heard very little in response from NOAA about how to deal with these spills, or the fact that I believe they didn't take the spill in Washington serious enough. We also have international examples of where finfish agriculture operations and oversight failed. In 2016, salmon farming in Chile contributed to a harmful algae bloom that killed nearly 300 million salmon and countless shellfish. The Scottish Environmental Protection Agency is currently investigating a Norwegian salmon farming company for allegations of its large-scale use of pesticides harming the environment. So let me be clear, poorly managed and underregulated offshore aquaculture poses a direct threat to our marine ecosystems and domestic fisheries. It is my understanding that the chairman is working on legislation to seize the opportunity that aquaculture represents, but we would be remiss if we didn't address some of the challenges. There are many unanswered questions when it comes to offshore aquaculture. Who decides where to site the facilities? Who will monitor and inspect the offshore fish farms? What response plans are in place for companies to respond? In our instance, the company blamed the changing of the tide and the full moon, I think it was, and basically said that was the problem that broke open their pens, when in reality it was just gross negligence. So what happens to bad actors? Will these offshore farms impact our wild fisheries, and how do we prevent and monitor for entanglement and bycatch? So these are just some of the questions, Mr. Chairman, and I know we could go on, but our maritime ecosystems are already under dire threat from rapidly changing acidity in our oceans, marine heat waves, oxygen depletion, and global climate change. And while we need high-quality protein to feed the world, it must be sustainable. So we can't further exacerbate the problems of our current fisheries and so we must answer these questions. So I look forward to working with you on this issue. I know the many challenges, and as I said, our shellfish industry has proven that there are great ways that you can produce aquaculture, but they meet many high standards, and I applaud them for meeting those standards. I would just point out, Mr. Chairman, our committee rules require that witnesses provide written testimony in advance of the hearing, yet as of 9 p.m. last night, we still did not have testimony from the agency witnesses because I understand that they are going through a review with the Department of Commerce. These issues are legally and scientifically hard, and NOAA needs to make sure that they are giving us this information so that we can have answers and questions prepared. Our Pacific Northwest shellfish growers consistently demonstrate that science-based sustainable aquaculture is a benefit to both the environment and the economy, and so we need to make sure that we are fully addressing these issues at today's hearings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much.